I found letters my late mother hid for me, one for every mistake I've ever made. I always thought grief came in waves, but for me, it came in silence. My mother died on a rainy Thursday in April, the kind of day that feels like the sky itself is mourning. The house felt too quiet afterward, too neat, like even the air was holding its breath. For weeks, I wandered from room to room, touching her things without purpose. Her knitting needles, the half-finished scarf on her chair, the chipped mug she used every morning. I didn't throw anything away. I couldn't. Mom had been everything to me. My father left when I was 10, and she never remarried. She was the kind of woman who made hard work look easy, always smiling, always steady. But underneath that calm, she carried things she never shared. I saw it in her eyes sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. After her funeral, I moved back into her house. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I figured things out. I quit my job a few months before she got sick, telling myself I needed space to think. I never told her that I'd been fired. She didn't need another reason to worry. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I found an old wooden box tucked behind a stack of photo albums. It was small and locked, the kind of lock that looked fragile but stubborn. There was no key in sight. I thought about leaving it, but curiosity won. I pried it open with a screwdriver, feeling oddly guilty, like I was breaking into her secrets. Inside were envelopes, thick, yellowed, carefully tied with twine. Each one had my name written on it in her neat handwriting. But what stopped me cold were the dates. The first was from 10 years ago, the next from 7, then 5, and so on. There were 12 letters in total. The top one had a note on it. Open this one first, you'll know when. My heart started pounding. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume, lavender and something sweet. I sat there on the dusty floor, holding that first letter, debating whether to read it. But I couldn't. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the box, about why she'd written those letters. Was it something she planned before she got sick? Was it her way of leaving me guidance after she was gone? Or was it something else, something she didn't want me to see while she was alive? I didn't open any of them for weeks. But life has a strange way of knowing when to push you. The day I got the call that my ex-girlfriend, Emma, was engaged, I felt something inside me collapse. Not because I wanted her back, but because it reminded me how easily I kept ruining things, jobs, relationships, promises. I drank too much that night, said things I shouldn't have to friends who didn't deserve it. And when I woke up the next morning with a headache and regret crawling up my throat, I knew what Mom's note meant. You'll know when. So I opened the first letter. The envelope was worn at the edges, like she'd held it often before sealing it. I remember how carefully Mom did everything. Even the way she tied her shoes had a kind of grace. As I tore the envelope open, I felt like I was holding her heart in my hands. Inside was a sheet of lined paper, folded twice. Her handwriting was steady and familiar, looping in the same gentle way she used to write notes in my lunchbox when I was a kid. For a moment, I was afraid to read it. But I did. My dear Matthew, if you're reading this, I want you to know that I'm not angry. Whatever happened, whatever brought you here, I already forgive you. You've always been too hard on yourself. You carry guilt like a backpack full of stones, never realizing you could just set it down. When you were 13, you broke the neighbor's window and lied about it. Do you remember? You cried for 2 days because you thought I'd never forgive you. But I never cared about the window. I cared about you. I cared that you were scared, that you were learning what kind of man you'd become. You've made mistakes, my love. You'll make more. That's what life is. Don't let regret turn you into a ghost while you're still alive. With all my love, Mom. I read it twice, then a third time, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. I didn't realize how much I'd missed hearing her voice until that moment. The way she always made pain sound temporary, like no wound was too deep for time to heal. That letter broke something open in me. I sat on the attic floor for hours, reading and rereading it, whispering her words to myself like a prayer. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the other envelopes. 12 letters, one for every mistake. But how could she have known? These weren't random. Each date was from a moment I remembered vividly. The second letter was dated the year I dropped out of college for a semester. The third was from when I'd crashed my car after drinking. The fourth, the year I cheated on Emma. It didn't make sense. How could she have predicted the things I'd do years after the date's written? I told myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe she wrote them later and just backdated them. Maybe it was coincidence. But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. That night, I went through old photos, trying to piece together what she was doing during those years. I found one from the year I dropped out, her sitting on the porch, notebook in hand, smiling at the camera. The same year as the second letter's date. I didn't open another letter yet. Something in me hesitated. Like if I kept reading, I'd unravel something I wasn't ready for. But then, 3 days later, I lost my job again. My boss said I wasn't showing initiative. Maybe he was right. I'd been distant, distracted, living half in memory and half in guilt. That night, I went back to the attic and took the second envelope. It felt heavier somehow, like it knew I was coming for it. And when I opened it, the first line made my hands go numb. Matthew, I know you've lost another job. And I know what you're thinking, that you failed again. But listen to me carefully. This is not failure. This is a reminder. My breath caught. The letter was dated 5 years before that night. 5 years before I'd lost this job. I dropped the letter, staring at it like it might change if I blinked. But it didn't. Her handwriting was clear. Her words were specific. I don't know how long I sat there. The room felt smaller, darker, like the air had thickened. When I finally picked the letter up again, the rest of it was softer, encouraging, loving, the way she always was. But that first line stayed burned in my head. How could she have known? I decided right then that I needed to read all of them. Not just to understand her, but to understand why. I didn't open all of them at once. I told myself I was just trying to process, but the truth is, I was scared. Every letter so far felt like she was watching me from somewhere I couldn't see, not in a ghostly way, but in a way that made me feel seen in places I didn't want anyone to look. For days, I avoided the box. I went about my routines, made coffee, stared at job listings, took meaningless walks through the same streets we used to stroll together when I was a kid. Everywhere I went, I saw reminders of her. The grocery store clerk she always chatted with. The bench by the lake where she'd sit with her sketchbook. The old bakery where she'd buy one slice of cake, just because. I'd never realized how much of my life was still woven into hers until she was gone. By the end of that week, curiosity won again. I went up to the attic late at night, the way you go somewhere you're not sure you should. The next envelope had my name scribbled in the margins 3 times, as if she'd hesitated before sealing it. It was dated the year Emma and I broke up, the ugliest breakup of my life. Matthew, I don't know what you did, but I can tell you're hurting. I've seen that look in your eyes before, the one your father had when he realized he'd broken something he couldn't fix. I know how hard it is for you to say sorry. It's not pride. It's fear. You're afraid that if you admit you were wrong, people will see all the cracks you try so hard to hide. But sweetheart, the people who love you don't care about the cracks. They care about the light that gets through them. Love is not about being good all the time. It's about showing up, even when you're ashamed. Don't let guilt turn you into someone who runs. I could barely finish it. I set it down on the floor and just sat there, my hands shaking. I'd never told her about the breakup, about how I'd cheated. I couldn't. I thought it would kill her to know the son she'd raised had done something so low. And yet, she did know. The next morning, I went through her old journals. She'd kept dozens of them. Most were filled with recipes, to-do lists, and notes about bills. But one, from the year I cheated, had a single line underlined 3 times. He's not himself, but I still see my boy in there. It felt like being punched in the chest. For the next few days, I opened a new letter every night. Each one was more specific than the last. She knew about the lies, the drinking, the fights. But she never sounded angry, just heartbreakingly gentle, like she was writing to someone she still believed could be better. By the time I reached the 9th letter, I was terrified to keep going. The later dates were from years I hadn't even lived through yet. The last one was dated 2027, 2 years in the future. I wasn't sure I could handle whatever it said. But something strange happened before I could decide. That weekend, a storm hit. Lightning, heavy rain, the kind that rattles windows and hums through your bones. The power went out halfway through the night. I was lighting candles when I heard something fall upstairs. The attic. When I climbed up, the wooden box had fallen over. Every envelope was scattered across the floor, except one. The last one. The one marked 2027. It was sitting perfectly upright, untouched, in the center of the room. I stood in the attic for what felt like forever, just staring at that final envelope. The rest had scattered in every direction, their corners bent and dusty, but that one lay perfectly still, like it was waiting. My hands shook as I picked it up. It felt heavier than the others, though it was just paper and ink. The date, March 14th, 2027, was written in the same graceful handwriting, only slightly shakier. That's 2 years from now. I thought about leaving it unopened. Maybe it wasn't meant for me yet. Maybe I wasn't ready. But part of me wondered, what if she'd known I'd find it early? What if I was supposed to read it now? So, I tore it open. Inside was the longest letter yet, several pages, written in a rush, as if she'd been racing against time. My dear Matthew, if you've come this far, it means you've already opened the others. I imagine you've cried, or maybe gotten angry at me for knowing too much. You've always hated feeling like someone could see through you. You're probably wondering how I knew about all those moments. The jobs, the heartbreaks, the drinking, the nights you didn't think you'd make it through. The truth is simpler and harder than you think. I didn't know everything. I only knew you. I saw patterns in you the way mothers do, small habits that repeat like echoes. I knew where your fears would lead you because I recognized them. They were mine too. I wrote these letters when I started feeling sick. I didn't want to leave you with silence. I wanted to leave you a map, not to your future, but back to yourself. If it's 2027, I hope you've forgiven yourself by now. If it's earlier, then I hope you're trying. I stopped reading. The sound of the rain outside had softened, but my heart was still racing. It wasn't magic. It wasn't prophecy. It was something scarier, the idea that she'd known me so well that she could predict my mistakes before I made them. I sat there and kept reading, each word sinking deeper than the last. You'll think your life is over more than once, Matthew. You'll convince yourself that you've wasted too much time, hurt too many people, lost too many chances. But I promise you, it's never too late to begin again. I know there's something you haven't told me, something that still keeps you awake. That's the secret you think will define you forever. But listen to me. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. You are the love you give after the fall. Someday, you'll stand in this attic again, and you'll understand what I was trying to do. Until then, live. Please live, Matthew. With everything I have. Mom. I don't remember crying. I just remember the quiet after, the kind of silence that feels sacred, like the air itself is listening. I spent the rest of that night putting the letters back in order, laying them gently in the box. I realized that every single one had been leading here, not to answers, but to forgiveness. Not hers. Mine. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not joy exactly, but relief, the kind that comes when you stop running from a part of yourself. But there was one line at the very end of that letter I hadn't noticed at first, written in smaller handwriting, almost hidden beneath her signature. You'll find the last thing I wanted to tell you behind the mirror. I froze. The mirror. Her mirror. The one in her bedroom. The storm had passed by morning, but the world outside still looked drenched in gray, the kind of quiet that follows after something heavy has been washed away. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in the attic with the final letter in my lap, reading that single line over and over. You'll find the last thing I wanted to tell you behind the mirror. It felt like a riddle, but knowing my mom, it was literal. She never did anything without intention. So when the first light broke through the clouds, I went downstairs to her room. Her mirror stood where it always had, tall, oval-shaped, with an antique wooden frame she'd inherited from her own mother. I remember how she used to stand there every morning, brushing her hair and humming softly. Sometimes, as a kid, I'd sit on the edge of her bed and watch her reflection instead of her face. It always seemed like she was talking to someone in that glass, maybe herself, maybe the version of her that time kept changing. I knelt down and ran my hand along the edges, tracing the tiny cracks in the wood. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it all, if grief had turned me into someone searching for ghosts in dust and memories. But then, when I pressed my fingers to the back panel, it moved. It wasn't sealed. There was a small space behind it, barely wide enough to fit a notebook. And there it was, a small, leather-bound journal with a ribbon tied around it. My breath caught as I pulled it out. The cover was soft and worn, the ribbon frayed. Inside, her handwriting filled every page. The first entry was dated the week after my father left. He keeps asking where his dad is. I tell him he's working. Someday I'll tell him the truth, that sometimes people leave because they don't know how to stay. Page after page, I read her thoughts, The things she'd never said out loud. How scared she'd been when money ran low. How proud she'd felt when I graduated. How she'd hidden her illness from me for months because she didn't want me to stop living my life. But near the end, there was one final entry. It was short, written shakily, like her hands had started to give out. If Matthew ever finds this, it means he's finally ready to understand. I know he'll blame himself for things that were never his fault. I know he'll feel lost. But I want him to know that love doesn't end where a heartbeat stops. It keeps moving, through the things we leave behind, through the people we shape without realizing it. I wrote those letters because I didn't want my voice to disappear. But this is the last thing I'll ever say. Live without waiting for permission, my boy. You don't owe the world perfection. You just owe it presence. And if you ever forget how loved you are, look in the mirror. You'll find me there. I pressed my forehead against the pages, shaking, tears dripping onto her words. It felt like she was still there, not haunting me, but holding me the way she always had when I fell apart. For the rest of the day, I didn't speak to anyone. I just wandered through the house, touching every object she'd once touched. The teacup on the counter, the photo frame by the window, the scarf still draped over her chair. The world didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, overflowing with her. That night, I put the letters back in the box and returned it to the attic. But I kept the journal. It sits on my nightstand now, right beside her old mirror. Some nights, I still talk to her reflection. I tell her about my day, about how I finally got a new job, about the new woman I've started seeing, the one who laughs like spring sounds. I tell her I'm trying, that I'm finally learning how to forgive myself. And sometimes, when the light hits the glass just right, I swear I can see her smiling back. I don't know if she planned all of this, or if it's just the way love works, echoing long after it's gone. But I've stopped asking why. Because some stories don't need explanations. They just need to be felt. And this one, hers, mine, ours, is finally finished.